Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome. I got a special treat for you today. I got Marcel Ryan, the Revanchist, and we'll get into how you pronunciate that here in a little bit. But he's a content creator, he's a voice actor, he's a narrator. He started his own podcast called Legends of the Jedi, where he takes us back into the past, years and thousands of years before what we know as the movies, the prequels, and the original trilogy, and so on. And we're going to talk about the Old Republic. And some people are familiar with it, some people aren't, but it's just great. And I'll pass it over to you, Marcel. And how you doing, man?
Oh, pretty good. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I came across you. It's funny how the reason I started, we were talking a little bit about this before we started, but how we wanted to do this to meet people and to talk about our passion.
Yeah.
So I talked to somebody who's a mutual friend of you, and then now that's how we got connected. And your stuff is just great. And I'm not as fluent in the Old Republic, minus the books and so on and such. But you are, and I love listening to what you got going on, man. And it's pretty good.
Thank you. That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. That's part of the reason why I got into this was, to spread awareness, but also to meet people. So this is a treat for me.
For sure. For sure. So why don't you tell us a little bit how you got into Star Wars and that whole backstory?
Sure. So this is reaching back. I think when I was a little kid, I can't even pin the age, maybe, 4, 5, 6, somewhere around that time. My dad showed me the movies, the original trilogy. I'm a little bit of an older fan, so I was actually able to see the prequels in theaters as they were coming out. I was a teenager at that time. And I have just vivid memories of going to episode 1 with my father. It was really Shadows of the Empire that got me into the expanded universe side of Star Wars, because I was always a fan of the movies. And then Shadows of the Empire came out for N64, I think in the mid 90s. And I had an N64 and I played it. And in the end, it was kind of up in the air as to whether the main character, Dash Rendar, survived or not. So I remember, back then we had just gotten, a 56K modem and we had the internet. And I went on theforce.net. I discovered this website and learned that Dash Rendar actually survived the events of Shadows of the Empire. And that was my first introduction to the expanded universe, getting this sense that there's actually something beyond the movies. There's a story beyond the movies. And from there, it kind of took off with the Bantam era novels and eventually the New Jedi Order and the prequels and the video games and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm similar. I grew up with the OT, but I was in high school when the prequels were coming out, and then that whole thing era took off. I'm a huge fan of the Phantom Menace because I remember just that feeling and how it was. But Shadows of the Empire, man, that game sure gets brought up a lot.
Yeah.
It's very popular. I'm a big Dash Rendar fan. And I just remember playing that with my buddies, and it was just a great time as well,
Yeah. Have you ever read the book Shadow Games?
Oh, it's on the list. I have it,
yeah,
but I have not read it yet. No.
It's a top 10 expanded universe novel for me. It's Dash Rendar is the main character in the book. That's all I'll say. And it's a really, really good. It's a really good book. So I move it up your list. I totally recommend it.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. I'm kind of started back I kind of jumped around and grabbed this trilogy or that book. And
I do the same. Yeah.
But now I kind of started with, going in the order from Lost Tribes and the Sith and then so on. And I'm currently on the Darth Bane trilogy, just finishing that up.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. So Darth Plagueis is next.
You've gone through all of the Old Republic era.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where I'm more fluent in it. But the comics and such, which we'll get into, they're a little harder to get your hands on nowadays. So, but that's unfortunate. So your dad took you. Do you remember any moment during that where you were just kind of like, I need more?
Yeah, I think, probably around the time that episode 1 came out, maybe just a year or two before, I used to collect comics as a kid. I still do, actually, but there was a period of time where I kind of got out of it and then got back into it. But I remember being at the comic store and I see these comics, Tales of the Jedi. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I like Star Wars. So I picked them up. I think it was like Golden Age of the Sith or Fall of the Sith Empire. It was like those, chronologically speaking, those first two arcs that I picked up because that was coming out at the time. And I read them and I fell in love with them. And then I eventually ended up collecting all the issues of the original run, Tales of the Jedi. I think it's like 35 issues. And that was, I think, what cemented me as not only an EU fan, but like a Star Wars fan, was Tales of the Jedi, because I thought it was just brilliant. It just captured my imagination as a kid. It's a mix of something that I've always been interested in, like Star Wars on the one hand, but also, ancient history, because the aesthetic for Tales of the Jedi, if you've seen those comics at all, it's very like old world. They have like Egyptian influences, Greco-Roman influences, all that kind of thing. So that was, I ended up studying that kind of thing in university, but it's always been a huge interest of mine, ancient history. And then here you have a Star Wars story that's ancient history. So
yeah, that's what I've heard. I've seen little bits and pieces of it. I don't own any of them, unfortunately. I'm working on it. I was actually supposed to have the Epic Collection Volume 4. It was supposed to be delivered yesterday, but it didn't happen. So hopefully Monday it'll come. But okay, back to it. So I never seen one really, except pictures of online. And you're right, the old Egyptian style. Like, I always liked that. I like there's kind of like a fantasy backside.
Yeah.
That people don't really see in the Tales of the Jedi. So I find that very intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, Star Wars has always been first and foremost a fantasy. It's a fantasy set in space fantasy. It's not really a sci-fi. I mean, there are tons of material in the expanded universe that's more sci-fi focused than fantasy focused. But I think like at its core, you have the Force, which is like magic. You can't really explain it. And that makes it, fantasy. And it also kind of, at least the original trilogy, follows those fantasy beats. The farm boy finds out he has magical powers and has to save the princess from the Dark Lord. That that kind of jumps right out of the page from Wheel of Time, from Terry Brooks, Sword of Shannara, all that kind of thing. So
yeah, it's very, very cool, and more people need to see that side of it, because it really, as the story goes, it kind of all flows into one, and it's really neat how that happens.
Yeah.
So that's cool that's how you wanted to create more. Mine, it was different. I was more of the toy kind of collector.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I knew there was books and I read a few, but I didn't really realize how deep the lore went. And then I picked up the Lost Tribes of the Sith, started reading that, and that's where it's like, oh man, this is really, I can really dig this. I get into this side of it. And then that's how I kind of journeyed into the Old Republic novels. Sorry, go ahead.
You met John Jackson Miller.
Yeah. Yes, I did. And that was quite an experience. He's a heck of a guy. Very nice. Yeah. He loves talking. You ask him a question and he'll stop what he's doing and, eye contact with you the whole time. And he just loves it. And he had a copy of the Omnibus Volume 1 there, but it was just kind of out of my price range.
Yeah, that's fair. These things, they can get pretty expensive. I'm happy that Marvel's reprinting the old Legends comics, but they sell out like this and they're gone. And then, you can try and buy them on a secondary market and it's, twice the price or 3 times the price or something like that. So
yeah, it's
really tough to collect. Yeah.
Fortunate how they do that. Yeah. That's why I kind of wait for them and pre-order them on Amazon. It's the best I can do. And hopefully I get on the list.
It's what I do too. So, you're a good company.
Yeah. Now that I talked about John Jackson Miller, that's you tweeted to him and he responded. You had a question for him, right? Considering a little topic here.
Yeah. I at the time I was reading or rereading the Knights of the Old Republic comics, and there's a faction in those comics called the Revanchists. Basically what they are is at the time there's the Mandalorian wars are going on between the Mandalorians and the Republic, and there's a faction of the Jedi that want to take the fight to the Mandalorians. They want to recoup lost territory, and they're led by this person called the Revanchist leader, who ends up becoming Darth Revan in the lore. And I had chosen that name for myself because I thought it was, it was a good name. Darth Revan has a good look to him. It's a big word, but it's easy to remember and kind of associate with me. So I thought maybe I'd tweet out to John Jackson Miller and be like, how do I pronounce this? Because is it Revanchist? Because it's Darth Revan. I think that's the correct pronunciation of the Sith Lord, who later, becomes or gets redeemed and becomes a Jedi again. But according to John Jackson Miller, it's Revanchist. So that's what I've been calling. But, if someone calls me Revanchist, which a lot of people do, that's totally fine. And I think that's, frankly, just as correct as Revanchist. So I would never try and correct someone for saying Revanchist over Revanchist.
And that's how I initially pronounced it until I'd seen you did a video about it, and that was pretty confusing.
My very first YouTube video, I thought it would be fun to, because I actually had a primary source from the author, and John Jackson Miller is so great about that. He's so great about interacting with fans on Twitter and answering their questions. I had a question for him about Lost Tribe of the Sith once, and he answered it right away. So I thought maybe I'll tweet him about this pronunciation and see what he has to say. I actually ended up doing the same thing for Kevin J. Anderson. I tweeted him asking him how to pronounce Naga Sadao. He's like one of the Sith Lords in Tales of the Jedi, his last name, and I sort of like phonetically set out a few different pronunciations of it, and his response was very cryptic and not at all helpful, but I appreciated that he responded. So
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I messaged John Jackson Miller later on because he actually came to our hometown and was at our public library here, and I live in a small town, and that was really cool of him.
Yeah.
But just thanking him for coming out, and it's like, I just read Knight Errant and I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm mad that I didn't get to get it signed, and the comics I'm trying to get. And he told me, hey, no worries, I'll be coming back your way in a few months. We'll meet up again. And actually, Marvel's coming out with the Epic Collection Volume 5 with all the Knight Errant.
Yep.
So it's like, boom.
I'm looking forward to that one because it also has Jedi versus Sith in that one, which is the Darth Bane story. I mean, you're getting the novel version of it with the trilogy. I think Path of Destruction covers the same content, but there was like a 6-issue comic series that preceded it that's going to be in that Epic collection, and my copy of it's like falling apart, my trade paperback of the 6-issue series. So yeah, I kind of got it beat up in the first place. So I'm looking forward to having the Epic collection on my shelf so I can actually flip through the pages without fear of them falling apart.
Yeah, I even worry about that with using the new stuff when you get it. It's like, I want to, be very careful. I mean, I can see your book collection behind you looks great, and you looks like you keep it all nice and tidy like everyone else does. So
yeah, I mean, we have some more shelves upstairs, and then we have, we have this 3 floors, right? This is the basement. So we have, more shelves on the main floor, and then we have even more shelves on, in our bedroom. And my wife likes to joke that, 90% of the things in this house belong to me because I just keep trying to find new areas to put my books and comics in and that kind of thing.
Yeah, my wife kind of says the same thing with all this stuff. She's like, you got more toys than any kid I ever known, and we're going to have to pack them up and put them in the attic. And it's like, oh, hold on here. But
wait, I have a question for you, actually. What's the pride and joy of your Star Wars action figure collection?
Oh, boy. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I know you can't see them all, and they're not all displayed here, but I have the Shadows of the Empire steel sealed Prince Shizor versus Vader dual pack with the comic, and it's in pretty pristine shape.
Yeah.
Because I was a big fan of Shadows of the Empire as well. Loved the game. The book was awesome. Everybody gets all uptight about the pheromone thing, but yeah, that's minor. I mean, the book was really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a minor thing too. I think you got to overlook that and sort of take the work as a whole. And I think what Shadows of the Empire means to the expanding universe is it's really important. And for that alone, it will always have a special place in my heart.
Yeah, for sure. And well, actually, I posted on my Instagram now. Everyone, I started doing that. My kids are showing me how to do that. So just so you know, but I posted a picture of the original Power of the Force Luke Skywalker lightsaber from, I
saw that.
Oh yeah. It's so heavy. Good. It's like really heavy compared to all the other plastic extension sabers. You know what I mean? So I mean, and it feels good in your hand, so it's really cool. That's probably my number one, because Luke from Return of the Jedi with that green saber is like my ultimate. So
Yeah. I actually for Star Wars toys, I had like a big win this summer. So, for the past 15 years, maybe even longer, my Star Wars toys, what little of them I had as a child, were kind of locked away in my grandmother's basement. And I liberated them this summer. And I just reliving those memories and finding, look, I pretty much had everybody there. For some reason Darth Vader's missing, but like everybody else from the original trilogies there. And I also found, it's kind of hard to see, but in the background you could see like a TIE fighter, sorry, on this, like just behind me over there. And then there's like the Millennium Falcon, and you won't be able to see it, but there's also an X-Wing. And these are like the Kenner Millennium Falcon and X-Wing toys. And
nice.
it was just so special to find that and be able to like put them in my basement again, because I had them. And then I gave all my 3.75 figures to my daughter. I was like, here you go, just play with them and make believe.
Yeah, use your imagination like we did, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I can see them back there. I love them. And that feeling of finding some old toys, some old gems, man, there ain't nothing like that for sure.
Nothing like it, for sure. It's a huge coup for me.
Yeah, well, right on. Big win. So kind of got a little bit of your backstory in. So what made you decide to start a podcast and a channel?
Yeah, that's a bit of a longer answer, so bear with me.
Broad stroke that, baby.
All right, so what happened was the sequel trilogy came out. And when I saw the first film, I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And then the second film and the third film came out, and I was increasingly disengaged with Star Wars. And I think after the third film, I was at like a low point in terms of my love for Star Wars. For whatever reasons, like if people love them, that's great. I personally don't, but like, I'm never going to tell someone like they're bad films, like, or objectively or anything like that. They didn't resonate with me. So I was, maybe I think the third film came out December 2019. I was kind of like looking around. It was early January at that time. And I see my bookshelf and I'm like, Heir to the Empire, right? Like that's, the very first novel that kind of relaunched the expanded universe, or launched it in the 90s. I know there was novels before then, Brian Daley and L. Neil Smith, but that was kind of the one that started the whole thing. And I had read it as a kid years and years and years ago. And I thought, why not reread it? I always loved the expanded universe. I always loved the original timeline. I remember very fondly reading those Bantam era novels and reading the New Jedi Order as it came out and talking to people on it on the message boards and the force.net. So I thought, I'm going to reread this. And from there, it just took off, over 2020 and 2021, we were stuck inside for so much of it. So I ended up just rediscovering the expanded universe in a way. Like it was always there. I had all these books from the Bantam era, a ton of books from the Del Rey era. I ended up filling in all the gaps in my collection because I wasn't going out and spending money. So I had some extra pocket change to spend on this kind of stuff. And I finished my, Dark Horse collection of comics. I'm almost done with getting all of the novels, but it was really that. And then I came to a point where I was sitting around and thinking like, this isn't, I love reading this stuff, but I want to talk to people about it too. And also Tales of the Jedi always had a special place in my heart because it's the one thing that kind of captured my imagination. And it just didn't seem like people were talking about it. And, the Disney timeline, they haven't really delved into the Old Republic yet. Like I know they have the High Republic, and that's a couple hundred years in the past, but the Old Republic stuff, like thousands of years in the past, they haven't really gone there. So there's nothing really there for me who's, or at the time was primarily an Old Republic fan. So I thought, why aren't people talking about this? And I thought maybe like I would do a podcast, mainly for like friends and family at the time. I was thinking like just to get people, give people an understanding of this exists. Like the Tales of the Jedi, this ancient Star Wars history exists. It's out there. You should totally read it. I've gotten a few of my friends into the comics since then, but that's how the podcast kind of started. I started, I think, in May of 2021. And then about a year later, in May of 2022, a friend of mine was like, "Why don't you create an Instagram fan page?" And from there, that's how I kind of got into the community. I've met so many people since then, but it was really, the podcast in May of 2021, and then a year later, I'd already had maybe 12 or 13 episodes under my belt at that point. I decided to start an Instagram fan page. And then from there, becoming eventually a YouTube content creator. I also have like a Twitter account as well, but I'm less active on there because I find Twitter to be kind of volatile, especially for Expanded Universe fans. But Instagram's lovely,
Yeah.
and YouTube as well. It's been really great.
That's kind of one of the, well, you got a lot more knowledge in the Tales of the Jedi, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this, is to meet people, talk, do podcast. I love listening to other people. I love how they became a fan. I love the things that they like. I love the things that they don't like. I like hearing all that information and taking it all in. It's just, it's fun. And like you and I are talking right now, this is a blast,
Yeah.
So we share that. That's why I wanted to do this.
Yeah. And I could talk about Tales of the Jedi all day. I think what I love the most about Tales of the Jedi is that it's so stylistically different from what you see in the original trilogy. But it feels like Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it looks like Star Wars. And I just love Tom Veitch. I love his work. I'm currently actually reading Lightsider, which was sort of released en masse earlier, or I guess late 2022. And I'm having a blast reading it. I'm reading it slowly because I want to save. It's a novella. It's only like it's less than 100 pages, but I want to savor the experience. I don't want it to end, right? And I think that's a really big accomplishment and really great achievement that they were able to do, is that set something in the distant past that doesn't necessarily look like Star Wars, because there's ancient ships and there's ancient buildings and that kind of thing, but also does look like Star Wars. Like you have all the things there that need to be there. You have the lightsabers, you have the Force, you have your starships.
Yeah, which like some of the cool aspects of that, like you just said, lightsabers in the beginning, they were lightsabers, but they needed a power pack.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people might not even know that.
Exactly. And I love that take on ancient history. And then Knights of the Old Republic came out, the video game, and I love that game. Don't get me wrong, but I've had so many discussions about this recently with people. But the aesthetic of Knights of the Old Republic, they sort of defaulted to that prequel aesthetic. The prequel trilogy aesthetic, which I understand why they did, sort of out of universe for marketing reasons, so that people could easier identify with the game. But for me, that was just such a huge missed opportunity, because it's set really only like 50 years or so after Tales of the Jedi, that story, Knights of the Old Republic, and they could have capped. And we've already we've seen the in-universe reasons as to why it looks different and why the galaxy looks different and that kind of thing. But it would have been so cool to see the Tales of the Jedi aesthetic in a computer game. And we'll never be able to see that, but it was in my opinion, a missed opportunity.
Yeah. And who knows what the reasonings were behind that, but that would have been incredible. I'm with you, because I'm more of that game came out, what, 2003?
Might have been 2001. I'm not sure here. Knights of the Old Republic. I can check it out.
Yeah. Well, while you're checking that out, back then, the games that were coming out were like, I was hardcore into Diablo 2. I played that game for years. So like I didn't play much of KOTOR.
Yeah.
But some of my buddies did, and I would pick it up here and there. But like you said, if they could have put the graphics from the comics or had that kind of feel, that would have been incredible.
Yeah, sure. You're right. Also, it was 2003, so it was that's a good memory.
Gotta win.
I remember when it first came out. I didn't play Knights of the Old Republic until I remember it very very clearly. I believe it was like Boxing Day 2005. I bought it because I remember buying it in Boxing Day, and I playing it sort of over the holiday, because in 2003 when it came out, the computer that I had at the time could not run that game. So
yeah, I finally just said heck with it, and I got myself a nice computer now that'll last me for a while, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about 15 episodes long. You started this back in 2021.
Yeah.
It's on Spotify. Apple Podcasts is where it originally all went
Yeah,
on. You're porting it over to YouTube.
that's
That's
right.
where I'm watching it. You're 6 episodes in so far. I'm
Yeah,
loving it. What I want to tell people about this is you make it easy to picture it in your mind. You got a nice your voice is smooth. You add character voices to it, which is
yeah,
cool. You got sound effects as you added later on.
yeah,
So I want to let people know that. And another thing that I really enjoy about them is you pause at moments to reflect on something big or something that you want to explain in detail a little more, which I find is cool, especially for somebody that hasn't read the comics. So I find that very helpful. And then you also tell people to go and Google a specific name, location,
yeah.
um, a lightsaber, whatever's happening, and that's really cool too because then that makes you adds more to the imagination side of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I actually, a friend had that suggestion. They're like, why don't you tell people to Google, or why don't you add search terms to the description of the episode itself so that people know how to spell it, and then they can go and search it for themselves and kind of get a better picture of it. I was like, that's a great idea because, obviously these are all represented on a comics page, but I'm conveying the narrative, you know, uh, with my voice. I can only do so much to paint a picture. So I'm happy to hear you say that apparently I'm doing an okay job of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's why I wanted to emphasize that in the conversation, just so people know, because that always helps,
Yeah.
especially if you're off doing something, and you show the comic book cover for
Yes.
each
Yes.
chapter or arc you're going through, and that's really cool too because I've never seen them all, and I'm sure a lot of folks haven't either.
Yeah, if I had more time on my hands, I would maybe show more of the panels as the story's going on. But unfortunately, with children and the job, full time job, I don't have that kind of time on my hands, and
Oh,
I still wanted to get the content out there so that people could enjoy it.
and yeah, I hear you. So why don't you tell us a little bit what the process is like when you created this?
Yeah,
Like if you're reading it, you're writing notes down, you're trying to think of how you want to sound for this character. Like, give us a little insight on that process.
yeah, for sure. So what I'll do is I'll read the issues first. Like, number one, that's the first thing I do is I'll read the issues, and then I'll probably reread them. And as I'm rereading them, I will script it. So it's a scripted podcast because I want to make sure that I get it right. I'm probably not good enough to do it just off the cuff and make sure I hit everything that I want to hit. But I scripted it, and I would throw in actual dialogue from the comics as I would sort of go through page by page and make sure I'm covering everything that I want to cover. But then I would also look at secondary sources to make sure that there's something else maybe that needs to be covered, that I want to throw in there as well. So after I script it, I will record it, and then I will spend hours and hours editing it. And the editing process as I've gotten better with the technology, because I've never done anything like this before. When I started in May of 2021, I was like completely new, Googling how to make a podcast and how to upload a podcast, how to record things. Like, I've never done anything like that before. But when I'm recording it, I try out some different voices, sort of see what works, what I think the character might sound like. I'm not sure if I always got it right, but sort of what they look like, and me having seen all these movies and shows in the past, and what they might sound like, and that kind of thing. So I try and put a voice to it, and if that voice is something that I can maintain and it works, like for Ulick Keldroma, I think I do kind of like a Batman voice for him. It's sort of like a deeper masculine voice, but and he's not that he's necessarily like a deep masculine guy, but mainly because, like, in my opinion, he's like the Batman. He's like the main character of the Tales of the Jedi. To him and Nomi Sunrise, they're like the main characters. And for Nomi, I tried to very poorly do like a Bastila voice, like a female kind of British accent type of voice, because that's I think Vima Sunrise, Nomi's daughter, was originally supposed to be who became Bastila in the KOTOR game. So I thought that might kind of be like a cool connection, but it's really just looking for these little bits of inspiration throughout, and seeing if it fits with the character. There was Mandalore the Indomitable, I think, in the later episodes, and I thought, I'm going to try and make him sound like Skeletor. Stuff like that. And then I try out the sounds, and then I spend hours editing it. And like I said, the editing process has gotten longer because I'll now I try and throw in sound effects, even just to break up the story a bit, but also Star Wars sound effects, like lightsaber sounds, and there's more of that in the later episodes. In the first 4 or 5, I was really
testing the waters.
Yeah, finding my footing.
Yep.
Which I think is, I've always thought about maybe going back and redoing those episodes, but I kind of like them as they are. I like them as, it shows like a clear progression, I think, in terms of how the podcast develops and me finding my voice, as they say. And I think that happens sort of around episode 6 when I get into the Tom Veach Tales of the Jedi proper, and I start talking about Ulick and Nomi's story. Because the first 5 episodes are Golden Age of the Sith and Fall of the Sith Empire, which were written by Kevin J. Anderson.
Now, them ones, I don't mean to interrupt you, but them actually came out later in the timeline, correct?
Right.
Like you're doing this in chronological order.
That's right. Yeah.
So I believe Golden Age was what, like 97, 98?
Right. Yeah.
And then the Tales of the Jedi was like 90, 91, maybe?
I think in 94, it started coming out, Tales of the Jedi, 94 to 97. And then after everything, I think Redemption, which is Ulick's final story, came out in 98. So that's episode 14 of my podcast, and then episode 15 is just like kind of a wrap up and filling in the gaps that I missed along the way. Like I never really explained how Frida Nad learned all this stuff about the Sith and became a Sith Lord, and that stuff comes from secondary sources, but also comes from the Tales of the Jedi Companion, which I had read after the fact because I finally had enough money to actually purchase it. That's a West End Games RPG product. Yep. And when I read that, I was like, oh, I have to do another episode now to fill in the gaps. And I had always envisioned this podcast as being sort of, at least in its infancy, as a 26, 27 episode series, because I wanted to cover the Tales of the Jedi, which I've done. The first 14 episodes, plus then the 50th episode is all done.
Recap.
That's the recap of the Tales of the Jedi. And then I wanted to go into the KOTOR comics, not spend as much time on them as I did the Tales of the Jedi, but I think I've broken it down, a solid 3 episodes on John Jackson Miller's Knights of the Old Republic comics, because that's like 50 issues plus War at the end, which I think is an extra 5 issues. So that's a lot of ground to cover, but I wanted to do that. And then I wanted to, as best as I can, because they're RPG games, cover the story for Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, which would necessitate me replaying those games. So I'm looking forward to that. And then maybe end with the Revan novel. And I know that's a very controversial novel for some, but it does really sort of lead right into the Old Republic MMORPG. So that seemed like the place to end my efforts. But recently I've kind of gotten back into the Old Republic, and I know also that's very controversial with people because some of the things don't really jive with the overall continuity. But I thought if I want to keep this going, I could probably cover some of the Old Republic content too. But it's envisioned as it's called Legends of the Jedi. It's envisioned as an Old Republic podcast, and sort of recapping that era and that story for people who don't really know it. People in this community already really know that story. That's actually another thing that I wanted to point out about Tales of the Jedi is people have a lot of mixed feelings about Knights of the Old Republic. People have a lot of mixed feelings about the Old Republic MMORPG. But I find that opinions on Tales of the Jedi, the comics, are largely consistent, and people seem to really like them. And, I haven't really heard a ton of criticism about them. And I think that's really special because, if Star Wars fans, that they can't agree on anything. So this seems to be one of the areas in the expanding universe where everybody says, hey, even if they're not my favorites, they're good.
Yeah, right.
Or I love them, or they're great. And I think that's really special.
Yeah, I've never heard nothing negative that I've looked. I try not to get into that. I like hearing people's thoughts and opinions, but you're right. You're spot on. Like everybody, that's a time frame that's just like stamped solid.
Yeah.
And then jumping back a bit about Googling and researching how to do this. I'm still doing that. My boys are teaching me how to use stuff, so don't feel bad. And I'm not afraid to admit that myself, because it takes a lot to get up here and try to present something to somebody, and hopefully they enjoy it, and then you can communicate and connect on that, Yeah. So but the first 5, 6 that you were talking about, that where you're like, I thought you had me hooked on the first episode.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm getting into this, and you're right. You could tell as you went, you progressively got better, or not better, but you added details
Yeah.
to it and started to make it special. And I like how each new episode starts with a little recap of what you just listened to.
Yeah.
You
At the
know,
time, I was putting them out like once a month. And so, my friends who were listening, buddies of mine in real life and stuff like that, they were like, I don't remember what happened last episode. It's been a month. And I'm like, okay, no worries. I got you. I'm gonna recap it in the next episode. And so that's what I started doing.
yeah, it's helpful. Trust me, it's really good. And I like how you excuse me, how you started with the Ulick voice and trying to determine what they're going to sound like, because that's always special. And I don't think anybody can really do something off the cuff. Well, I'm sure there are. I take that back, but off the cuff,
Yeah.
non-scripted. I would want to listen to something that's scripted, and I've tried to do that with a few of my content that I created, but I don't have that niche for it like some people do.
Yeah. And there's Tales of the Jedi audio dramas out there. I think they cover the first 4 or 5 arcs of the story. I actually own them on audio cassette. I don't have anything anymore that can play an audio cassette, but I own them, and I think they're on YouTube if you search for them. I never listened to them before I did this podcast because I didn't want that to influence what I did. I kind of just wanted to go off my own inspiration. I still haven't listened to them. I eventually will. And I'm looking forward to it, but I didn't want that to influence my own interpretation of what their voices might sound like. And frankly, I also didn't want to be discouraged because that's probably a lot better than what I have. But at least what I have, I explain the story. I try and go into like a little extra, and an audio drama is not necessarily just going to do that, right? It's going to just stick to the story. It's not going to tell you the lore behind it. And also the other thing I do in my podcast is I talk about the letters column because I own
bring that up.
Yeah. Sorry, I got ahead of myself, but I talk about the letters columns because I own all the single issues of Tales of the Jedi, and so there's some interesting stuff in that letters column. And one thing in particular, there was a fan that wrote, and I think this might be in one of the Fall of the Sith Empire issues, and said like, I don't think that this is what the early Sith should be like. This doesn't really make sense to me. And Kevin J. Anderson himself responded to that letter and said, this is the framework that George Lucas gave us. So, you may not like it, but it's from him. And that's really awesome. That's, and I've since done a video. It's my second YouTube video, but it's basically like how involved was George Lucas in the Tales of the Jedi. And it's like a maybe 12-minute video or something like that. But I researched it a lot, and I think that video demonstrates that George Lucas was involved in a lot of the expanded universe products in the early days, like, more so than maybe say post 2006 when he became less involved, or post 2008 when he became less involved, up to the buyout by Disney. But there was this interview that came out recently with Lucy Wilson, and she said that George got involved after Dark Empire, right? And sort of Tales of the Jedi came out after Dark Empire because that's what Tom Veitch wrote first. He wrote Dark Empire first, then Tales of the Jedi, and so he was pretty involved at that stage. And I think that video demonstrates that they gave him a bunch of questionnaires, he answered, and even if his opinion or his vision had changed since then, and I think it did change a bit when he started to write the prequels. What we see on the Tales of the Jedi, a lot of it, maybe not the individual story beats, but the overarching framework is George approved and George influenced. And, as the creator of Star Wars, he will always have a special place in my heart. I think, George Lucas's word is, he changes his mind a lot, but like, it's important to me. I want to know what he thinks of these things because he created Star Wars.
Yeah, I find that same. It's exciting to hear what his thoughts were.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I was going to bring that up to you. So yeah, that you're making my job easier here. I was going to say there was a letter from Kevin J. Anderson, and then how George Lucas he was all for this and he approved it, but he wanted to have like a veto power. I believe you talked about that, and so that's pretty interesting there.
Yeah.
That he was like, yeah, go ahead, but I want to say what I'm going to say here, you know?
Yeah, there were some things that he nixed and some things that he said, like, yeah, that'll work. Go ahead. That works fine. And, I think that's really cool that they had, I don't think they were talking to George directly. I think they were going through Lucy Wilson at the time. But the fact that he had that oversight, and it makes sense. Like, they're telling the story about, the early Jedi Knights and the early Republic, and that was unbroken ground at that point, right? Like, they had never really gone there before, so it makes sense that the creator is going to be involved in that because it influences how people might see his vision.
Absolutely. And you're right. You mentioned it before about how Disney hasn't touched. And I don't know. I want to kind of see them touch it, but keep it true to what it is, right? But I don't know if they ever will touch that. That's kind of like a sacred, special time era in the lore of Star Wars.
My own take on that, I don't know, this may be a bit controversial, but if they do go there, and I think maybe eventually they will, but if they do go into that era, I hope they do something different. I don't really want them to. I like that this exists in the expanded universe, and I don't want to see the Disney version of Tales of the Jedi.
Okay.
I'd rather that they just did something completely different. So that's my take on it. But people may disagree with me. I just like that it exists in the EU and special to the EU, and everybody, whether you're an EU fan or you're a Disney fan or you're both, they really seem to like these stories, specifically Tales of the Jedi. But a lot of people like Knights of the Old Republic as well. I know that they're doing the remake, or that at least they were. I think it's been indefinitely shelved or something like that.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I had heard through sources online that the remake was supposed to still be set in the Legends timeline, the expanded universe timeline. I think a lot of people anticipated that it might be updated for the Disney timeline. I don't know that that's the case, but again, I'm not an authority. I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and what they do.
Yeah, I like the EU, but I forget sometimes that there's still that line, because there are things in Disney that I enjoy, because it kind of got my wife into it, my kids a little more. So like, I forget about that. And you're right. I guess, some things, let's not touch them. It's just, I can see how people struggle with if they add the character from back then, put it in the new and change it. And then that kind of creates a whole conundrum there all on its own,
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of my reasoning is when Disney decided to discontinue the expanded universe, I mean, for the most part, they've discontinued it with some minor exceptions here and there over the years. They talked about creative freedom. And so I'm not necessarily a huge fan of what they've done with that creative freedom, so to speak. Like, I do. I have read a lot of the Disney canon novels and comics over the years before I sort of got back into the expanded universe. So I'm well versed in that timeline as well. But I really want to see them exercise that creative freedom when it comes to the Old Republic. I don't want to see the same story beats repeated, that they had in the expanded universe. So I would like to I'd be interested to see their take on the Old Republic and how that differs from the EU take. Because I have an interest in ancient history, and so I don't want to just see the same story repeated or a different, like a watered down version of it or anything like that. I want to see, like, let me see your creative freedom take on this. I want to see what you can come up with and how that might look. So that would be interesting to me.
There you go. That's what I like doing this for, because I never thought of it that way. So that's perfect. Sometimes I just want to see them tell that story from that time era the way it was written.
Yeah.
That's kind of my mindset. So then, it's like, well, that's a great idea. So there you have it, folks. We got some changes happening here and decisions.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So we hit the Jedi journals, which I wanted to talk about, which that's pretty cool to see old fans. Now, are them in the comics, like in the back of it?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, obviously people who would read comics in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there'd be like the letters columns, and they still have that today to a certain extent, but it's kind of gone extinct a little bit. But you have these letters columns where fans would write in or email in, and they would ask questions about or praise or criticize the comics. And I think that there's some hidden gems in those letters columns in the Tales of the Jedi. And so wherever I saw it, I tried to point it out to people who were listening to the podcast, like, hey, there's this person who had this unique perspective. I think there was one letters column where someone criticizes the Tales of the Jedi aesthetic because they say that it doesn't look all that different from what we see in the original trilogy, and yet there's supposed to be 4,000 years in between these two things. And how could there not have been that much technological advancement? And I thought the answer, I don't recall it specifically at this point, but the answer I thought was pretty good, and they at least tried to engage with that fan on that answer. And I thought that's kind of neat that they're taking these criticisms, they're trying to answer them. I think it adds to the Tales of the Jedi. It just adds an additional layer of context to it. That's really cool.
Yeah, and especially back then, we didn't have social media like we have today, so that's like how you communicated, and then the next issue or what have you, when they would put them in there, that'd be pretty cool to see.
Yeah. So there's 15 episodes. I eventually want to get to episode 16, which will cover maybe roughly the first third of the Knights of the Old Republic comics. I think the last episode I put out was in July, and then we had a kid like a month later, and that's kind of slowed me down a bit. And I've since pivoted to doing narrating short stories in the expanded universe. I want to, over the next like 4 or 5 years, I want to hit them all and narrate all of them. I'm going in chronological order, so it's going very slowly. And that's kind of taken up a lot of my time because I try and, edit that as well and put in some sound effects and do voices for that and put in some music. But I do want to return to the Legends of the Jedi podcast and start putting out more episodes, because it's something that it's like a little fan project, but I really enjoyed doing it. And it's been my first foray into voice acting. Like I used to do like some voices and voice acting when I was in high school and in university and stuff like that, but never really like this. So this has been it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. And congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I know what it's like to have kids, and eventually they take your time and
take it all.
Right. And there goes your money too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Especially when they get older and electronics are a thing. Yeah. We had
you're saying buy everything that I need to buy now before they get older, and then yeah. Okay.
Both of our boys they wanted computers for Christmas, so they got gaming computers. So so when they get older, good luck. Keep saving.
I'll keep that up.
Yeah. So that I was going to hit you with that is like, what's the future look like for you? Do you have any other ideas? You already mentioned some of them, but do you have anything after that? Like what's a goal for you?
Yeah. Well, there is, like I said, I want to continue reading short stories. Right now, I'm actually in the Tales of the Jedi era, ironically, in my short story reading, but I have like maybe 8 or 9 left, and then I'm moving on to the Knights of the Old Republic short stories. And eventually I'm going to get to, the SWOTOR era, eventually the Darth Bane era, and then the Clone Wars, and it might take a couple years, but I'll get to the Rebellion era eventually. And then, post Return of the Jedi, which is now it's become my favorite part of the expanded universe, is the post Return of the Jedi stuff. That's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time, right? Because I've been doing it for a few months and I'm still in like ancient Star Wars history. I want to continue with the podcast, and I want to get it up to at least episode 26 or 27, where I kind of talk about Revan, and then decide at that point in time whether or not I want to keep doing it. Other than that, those are the 2 things that I want to focus on. There's a fan audio drama of Tom Veitch's Lightsider coming out, and I'm lending my voice work to that. I'm narrating it, and I'm also doing the voice of Cam Solusar. So that's going to be really cool when it eventually does come out. And then just try my hand maybe at some, creative fiction, fan fiction. I know it's kind of controversial, fan fiction, in terms of, what it means to the expanded universe fandom. But to the extent that we're not really getting new work, I kind of want to keep creating my own,
Yeah.
and see where that takes me. But that's really out there. That's very ambitious.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have time for any of that, but I'm going to keep going with the podcast. Hopefully in the next couple of months, there'll be a new episode out, and keep going with my readings, my short story readings.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, congratulations on the voice work. Like I said, man, you got a nice voice, and how you present, you know, very articulate, very clear.
Yeah. I try it. You know, it's something that I wish I had gotten to a little earlier in life. But I kind of want to look into getting better at it, and better and better and better. And I think the only way to do that is to practice. Right. So
yeah, for sure. The post Return of the Jedi stuff, I'm excited to get there. I know I've read around a little bit, pick and choosy here, but I keep hearing about the new Jedi Order and how great that is. And I really want to read that, but I just want to enjoy the whole experience and take my time.
Yeah. Take your time. You'll get there eventually. The new Jedi Order, is like the Marvel. It's like the Infinity War Endgame of the expanded universe. It's like where it all kind of comes together. At least all the post Return of the Jedi Bantam era stuff all comes together. It's absolutely brilliant, and I'm so grateful that I was able to read it as it was coming out. Like I remember all the controversy that Traitor by Matthew Stover had when it first came out. Now it's quite liked by a lot of people. I remember, waiting in line for Star by Star by Troy Denning to come out, and being really excited about that because it was going to be the biggest book in the expanded universe ever, and waiting for the unifying force to see how it all ended. And I was really excited about all that. So I'm very grateful that I was able to live through that era and participate in the hype on the message boards on the Force.net. Which, cool. I haven't gone on message boards like 15 years, but
yeah, some people are like, "What's that?"
Yeah,
before
Discord existed.
Yeah, that's really cool. I own all of the new Jedi Order books.
It's awesome.
So they're on the shelf, and I got a few in hardcover, and one's actually got a CD in it that's not open. That must have some bonus material or something. But yeah, so I'm excited to get there, but. Like, I just want to tell fans to just enjoy the experience, take your time, start from chronologically put out there, right? Yeah. That's the best way to do it so far that I'm noticing.
Yeah. I'm doing rereads right now, and or first time reads for a lot of the Clone Wars stuff that I missed the first time around because I wasn't so into that era, and now I am very much into that era, but before I wasn't really into that era. And I'm looking forward to rereading this year, like, the Marvel comics, the original Marvel comics, the 77 run. I'm looking forward to rereading, some of the novels, the Bantam era novels, even like the ones that I didn't really like Children of the Jedi and Planet of Twilight were my least favorite as a kid, by Barbara Hambley. Like I'm looking forward to rereading them because I want to see what does, me 20 years later now think of these books,
how it changed.
Yeah. For instance, Mos Eisley the Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina was a book that I read when I was a kid, and I thought it was good, but I read it as an adult, and it just blew my mind. I was like, this is like one of my favorite books in the expanded universe. This is like the expanded universe at its best because you have all these random characters that you just see on screen for maybe like 4 or 5 seconds,
and now they got a story.
This expands the universe. Like now we know all these things about them that we didn't know before. It's incredible.
Yeah. That's cool. And it's a good point too, even to reread something later on. But like, there's a lot of people out there that do great book reviews, right? It's not my niche.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not really a reviewer. So
no. But I've listened to some, and I like the spoiler-free ones. But some people, I didn't really care for this book, and I read it, and I was like, this was great. You know what I mean? So you got that aspect of it. So you got a plan. It sounds great. I can't wait to hear more of it, man, to be honest with you. No rush, because I know what it's like to be a family man. But I got some fun questions here. We'll have a little bit of fun here for you. Sure. So what type of character would you want to be in the world of Star Wars? Like a bounty hunter, a Jedi, a Sith?
Yeah, that's a good question.
A droid?
A droid. Yeah. I would probably want to be... Oh man, I don't even know. I'm like thinking of like, who did I choose in the Old Republic when I played? Probably not a Jedi or a Sith because their life expectancy is not great. either way. I would probably want to be like a smuggler or something like that, like a Han Solo type. You know,
Right.
I think my favorite character, and this might be one of your questions, so I'm actually not
No,
gonna.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
My favorite character in Star Wars is Lando Calrissian. So
Wow.
maybe a businessman.
A lot of people like Lando, man.
Yeah, he's the best.
He's a stud.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Well, okay. So you want to be a smuggler. What would your smuggler's name be?
Oh, I don't know. I created a character for the Old Republic recently. His name's Vilko Mar. So Vilko Mar. So that would be the name.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
What's your favorite color saber?
Ooh. I really like yellow lightsabers. We don't see enough of them. I thought it's really cool how they look.
Yeah, the
Golden sabers.
Yeah, it's got a different, yeah, it's like a tinge to it. You can't, it's like gold but yellow and orange little mixture. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite ship?
Imperial Star Destroyer. Just the design of that ship is incredible. I got the Lego set as an adult, and I put it together, and it was just incredible. Like it just looks so good on a shelf. I love like the wedge shape of it, and it's the very first thing that you kind of see in A New Hope. It just captured my imagination.
Yeah, that's pretty. Have you watched any behind the scenes documentary on like industrial light magic? Have you seen that?
My wife and I tried to watch the first episode, and we got tired and we had a kid and stuff like that. So we didn't continue with it, but I do want to go and watch. I think it's like a 6-part documentary on Disney. I want to watch it all. I've seen some of the behind the scenes stuff as a kid when I bought the prequel trilogy discs on DVD. Like they used to have extras, and I see George Lucas behind the scenes designing the prequels. So I've seen a lot of that behind the scenes kind of stuff, but not really so much for the original trilogy.
Yeah. And that you got to check that out. And I get falling asleep and stuff. But how
not
they
just boring.
No, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but they should. I can't believe them guys and what they did back then and how they created stuff. It's incredible to see that. So I highly suggest watching that.
I originally recently watched the original cut of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and they hold up. Like they are so good.
Yeah.
Before the time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. They changed movies forever, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's just my thought. So coming to a close here, is there anything out there that really stands out to you in like the Old Republic that you want to share with someone, like when they get to that moment, like this is your favorite?
I just love ancient Jedi and ancient Sith history.
Okay.
I love learning about that. I know they've gone even further back with the with the Dawn of the Jedi comics, but the stuff that we see, I think it's like issue 2 of Golden Age of the Sith opens in on Korriban, and there's a funeral going on for Marka Ragnos, who's like he was the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith, and he passed away. And seeing the Valley of the Dark Lords and seeing those ancient crypts and those ancient pyramids, and then getting to actually loot those crypts in Knights of the Old Republic, I thought that was so cool. Like I've always been a fan of archaeology, and when I was a kid, I loved Indiana Jones, and the Old Republic is an era of high adventure. It's an era. It's like the early 1900s for us when we were like rediscovering ancient Egypt and Greco-Roman ruins and that kind of thing. Like you can do that stuff. Like you can do that stuff, and you can live in that world, and it's just amazing. And there's so much mystery there, and so much that's not known. And the Sith are an actual thing, right? There's the dark side is very prevalent in the galaxy. It exists, and but there's also like the light side is very prevalent in the galaxy too. So you have just these great stories of good and evil, of heroes and villains, and I think it's just such a special, especially Tales of the Jedi, it's such a special era in Star Wars. I hope more people learn about it and read it. I know they came out with a Disney timeline show that has the same name, but has nothing to do with the Tales of the Jedi that I'm speaking about. It has to do with Clone Wars era stories, and so I hope that people kind of look past that and see that there's this other Tales of the Jedi, and that they get to know that as well.
Excellent. That sounds great, and I hope they will. And there you have it, folks. Straight from the Revanchist's mouth about the tales of the Jedi and the golden age of the Sith.
Yeah.
I'm honored that you came on. I
Thank you,
I had a lot of fun. This was fun. We're gonna do this again because I got some other questions and stuff that I didn't get to, and I love learning about this, and you're doing a great job with this. I'm gonna put link in the description for your Instagram, for your Twitter, if you still use that.
Yeah.
And then also your channel. And
Yeah.
you guys got to check him out. He's great. And is there anything else that you want to say before we head her off?
No, just thanks for having me. And I'm out of curiosity, what's your favorite lightsaber color? That question threw me off. I've never been asked. It seems like it's such a common question, but I've never been asked it before.
I gotta go with green.
Green?
I like
It's classic.
It's just when Luke hit that in Return of the Jedi, I was just mesmerized by that. You know,
sure.
Nothing's topped that. And then also Qui-Gon had a green one, so that was, he was another favorite.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, there you have it, folks. If you like what I got going on here, hit the like button, subscribe, share, tell your neighbor, go tell them there was an epic Old Republic story by the Revanchist on this channel, and hang in there. And until next time, we'll see you guys soon.